Welcome back to another edition of the Pagcast. I'm your host, Michael Pagani, joined alongside Carleton Ravens goalie, Mark Grametbauer. Mark, welcome to the Pagcast. Thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Being in another shutdown, how has this affected you emotionally and physically?
Emotionally, not too bad. I'm pretty lucky to be living with some roommates right now. So we're always trying to keep busy, watch some sports or just get some things out of the way. And then physically, it's been a little tougher, having like gyms closed down and not being able to go to the rink. Definitely takes a toll on an athlete's body, as well as like other people. I'm sure are struggling with what's going on in today in Ontario. But we just try to have our workouts at home, try and stay as fit as we can because you never know when we might be returning.
Well, speaking on that return, when Ontario released their statement describing which leagues could operate under this new shutdown, the OUA was not one of them. Could I have your comment on how that made you feel at the time?
Especially seeing us not being able or not being seen as like elite athletes definitely hurt a lot of the guys. I know a lot of the guys on the team and every other player around the OUA was really wasn't too happy with the circumstances they gave us because many of us came from those leagues that are considered elite, right? A lot of us came from junior and came from the OHL and the WHL and the Q and even other junior A leagues that are able to play, which were considered elite, where most of our players come from those leagues as well, and not being put in that same category really kind of bummed us out. And I know a lot of people, as well as other sports, everybody's been pushing to try and kind of get us back open.
And I have to agree with you guys there because it honestly doesn't really make sense if you think about it. Because a lot of people who graduate from the OHL, right, go on to OUA Sports or the Q, the Dub, whatever you want to say there. And then you can talk about the minor basketball leagues. They go into the Canadian Elite Basketball League, that's the EBL, and it doesn't really make sense that the OUA wasn't a part of their elite category.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about, especially as we come from those leagues. Not even that, but even players moving on. Like we've had a couple players sign in the East Coast. We've had a couple players playing in Europe now. Even for like the football team, there's like a couple guys going to the CFL, right? There's soccer players signing. So for them to kind of just shut us out and not say that we're elite athletes in all aspects, not even just hockey, but even from all the other sports that we have at our schools. It's just really sad to see that they weren't really pushing for us to try and stay on the ice.
I'll ask you right now before I forget. So CJ Garcia, Andrew Jarvis, and Cody Caron were the three that left, right?
Yeah. Also, Jeremy Masella left, and
Right.
then
Yeah.
Cole Carter left, but those are a little like fresher as well. But yeah.
How is that loss going to affect the team? Do you think if you guys do get back on the ice? Because those guys are like that's a major loss.
Oh yeah, they're great players, especially for our team. And I know, especially if you look at numbers wise, that's three defensemen that we lose. So if we do return, it's going to be definitely tough trying to fill those shoes, especially with guys that have that experience in our league, as like Cody and CJ do, because they've been there for their fifth year. So losing that experience is going to be huge, and those are skilled players as well. So filling those shoes is going to be difficult. However, I mean, that's the way hockey goes, and that's how a lot of sports goes. Like you kind of got to deal with adversity. So we have a good group of guys and a lot of young guys now that want to step up and kind of prove that they should be playing in this league. So I think it's a good challenge for them and a good challenge for us as a team.
Getting into your story here, who you are as a player, was there a player growing up who you wanted to model your game after?
So as a goalie, it's kind of easier to kind of pick who you want to watch because they're always on the ice, right? So I really admire the way like Hendrik Lundqvist played. Even when I was a lot younger, like my family coming from Czech Republic, I know Dominik Hasek, the Dominator, he was from the same country. So it was pretty huge to kind of watch him just have a completely outrageous style, if you want to say, and be so successful with it. So I don't know. I think I just really focused on a lot of goalies that I liked as him. Like his battle level is what I really implemented in my game, like never giving up on anything. And doesn't matter how you make the save as long as you make it at the end of the day. And then Hendrik Lundqvist was playing for so long too, like
oh yeah,
just being the king at what he does.
well, I gotta say there are some Dominic Hasek like vibes I get from the saves you make this season. It was wild watching you.
Yeah, no, thanks. But yeah, even in practice, I kind of grew up always battling. So even from practice, some guys were like, "Why are you even diving for that puck? Like, there's almost no chance you can get it right." And I'm like, "Well, in a game, I'm gonna die for it. So why not die for it in practice at the same
Exactly.
time? Like, you're gonna learn those small adjustments the more you do it. So trying to keep doing that every day is helped me a lot.
Now, goalies, it's kind of a weird position because you guys are always, facing the puck, facing 100-mile-per-hour slap shots. So, why did you want to become a goalie?
To be honest, I don't even know. There are small things. My parents always said I started out as a player when I was a kid, and they always said like you were always trying to like block pucks and always like trying to stop things. And my dad always said that I would come home and be like, there's a goalie in the net, right? And I'm like, yeah, but he's not going to stop it. I am. So I think I just kind of that mentality that I had as a kid, and it kind of grew from that. Not only that, but I love the gear they were wearing. I thought it looked so cool. I was like, it's futuristic. Like they almost look like Halo characters. Like I was like, I want to look like that. I want to have a cool helmet. Like, so I think everything just surrounding that and me just always wanting to, I guess, stop the puck, even just naturally. So I think it just became pretty natural for me to switch over.
Well, getting into your career here, let's start with, in the QMJHL, getting signed with Armada there, your first season. How did you deal with being so far away from your family?
So it was definitely tough at times, especially being that young. I'm very happy because before I even played there, I played some junior hockey for the Truro Bearcats, which is only like an hour and a half from Halifax. So it's not too bad. It's not too far from home, but it kind of helped me have like that adjustment before I moved so far away. It helped me adjust not having my parents around, but also like they're not so far away where I didn't get to see them. But as soon as I moved to Montreal, I had an amazing billet family, which helped a lot. And I know the coaching staff there was unbelievable. So it was a pretty easy adjustment for me, as weird as that sounds. But looking back at it now, that's why I'm able to like kind of be wherever I need to be or be in Ottawa at this time, because I'm just so used to being away from home that it became natural.
You didn't have the best numbers in your rookie season with Armada, but how did they help with your development?
So I really worked hard with their goalie coach there, and it wasn't mostly my like the skill that was holding me back. It was a lot of mental aspects, just especially like you just mentioned, like living far away and adjusting to that new league. It was difficult for me, especially mentally, because I always wanted to be the guy. I always wanted to be number one. So like not having success was tough for me. So we really focused on like my mental aspect of the game, and I think just that team pushing me really helped me to kind of understand how the league works. Not only that, but I also had an amazing second goalie mentor, I guess you want to call it. I had Samuel Montembeault, who's playing for Montreal right now. So having him in the room was unreal, and he's such a positive guy, and the way he thinks about the game is amazing. So I learned a lot from him as well.
That's huge. Having, he's the backup right now for Montreal, so it's huge
Yeah.
having a future NHLer be your goalie coach.
Yeah, no, it was great. Like he was kind of just being there as like he was their starter at the time, and then we were working with as well as like the goalie coach for I guess it'd be Laval now, but he was with the Montreal's AHL team. So kind of getting all those perspectives and all the way they think about the game, and just these small little things you normally don't pick up on. But it really helped, especially with like my mental game, how I mentioned.
You got traded to Gatineau. How did you find out about the trade?
It was honestly right at the trade deadline. It was kind of crazy. Like I wasn't supposed to get traded. I was supposed to be in Blainville for most of my career. But the way things worked was Montembeault was actually supposed to play for Florida, I believe, or play on their East Coast team or their AHL team. And somehow things just didn't really work through in that aspect. And they were saying that I am like a starting caliber goalie, so they didn't really want me to back up behind him for the next 2-3 years till he got to that level. So it was kind of not supposed to happen, but as soon as it happened, like you don't really have a choice. So I had to kind of pack those things and head out that day. But I think I got traded like 2 or 3 hours before the deadline even ended. So it was a really quick turnaround.
That's a crazy day because you weren't even expected to get traded. And then you're like, all right,
Oh,
pack
no,
your
not
bags
at
out of
all.
here.
Oh yeah, it was insane. And it was crazy because it was like the first time I ever like experienced hockey as a business, right?
Yeah.
Because growing up in minor hockey, it's always like you're on that team no matter what. Like you
Mhm.
kind of it's how that works. And that was the first time I really experienced like how the business side of hockey really works, and that there's trades and that like the reasons why things are made. It was interesting. It was a good experience. I know at that time it was tough for me to handle because I was like,
You
oh, you're
weren't used
young,
to
and
it.
I
You
was
didn't know
away.
you didn't know what the routine was.
No, exactly. I didn't know how things worked. So, and it was my first year in the league. I didn't
Mhm.
know any of like that happening. So, when it happened, it was kind of a shock to me, especially knowing I wasn't supposed to get traded. But yeah, it kind of happened. Had to move out that same night and move over to Gatineau, which wasn't too far down the road, just 2 hours. But still, it was a surprise.
Well, you went 12-3 in 15 games with Gatineau during the rest of the regular season, posting a 214 goals against average and a 912 save percentage, which is actually very impressive. Was it just the defensive systems in place, or how did your numbers increase?
I think it was like everything. I think it was just me kind of being traded and wanting to prove everybody wrong that like I shouldn't have been. I definitely took it that way and like trying to spark a fire, look at all the positives at it. However, when I did get traded there, we were a dominant team. We did have a lot of guys playing in the AHL or in the NHL now on that team back then. So we were definitely a dominant team. But the biggest thing I saw was our head coach. It was Benoit Gru, and he just the way he ran that team was incredible. Even though he's known as to being a tough coach or a tough coach in that league, but the way he kind of controlled our offense and our defense was spectacular.
The next season, you again didn't have the best numbers with the Olympique, and once again got traded this time to Charlottetown. Does it get a bit tiresome always ending up on the trade block?
It does, but looking back at it now and knowing what I know, like it was always kind of for the better. I know that year when we weren't playing well, we lost our head coach. The new head coach that came in wasn't really on everybody's page. We lost a couple players, so like there were a lot of things that weren't going well at that time, not just for me, but for everyone. And it was just a different aspect. And I know for me, I was happy to kind of get out of that situation, especially to have a chance to kind of play back in the Maritimes. Since I've been away for so long, I've been playing in the Quebec side, so I was happy to kind of go back home in the Maritimes, which is funny to hear because a lot of players in the Q always say there's a pretty big split with like Quebec and the Maritimes, like the French and English sides, which I didn't find too bad, but was good to kind of be closer to family and kind of have that leadership role on those teams.
It also must have been nice seeing your family at the game. I assume that they wouldn't have been able to make it out to the majority of the games when you were on the Quebec side versus the Maritime side.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was in Quebec, I think they only came to maybe 2 games since I've been there when I was in Blainville, because it is a far trip, right? So, but as soon as I came to Charlottetown, they were able to come visit me for a couple more games, and even we play Halifax many more times, like in that division than we would have in the Quebec division. So it was good to kind of see them and kind of get their support from when I played uh, closer to Halifax.
In the playoffs, you guys faced off against Bay Como. How does it feel to get the goal support needed from the offense during that series?
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, even that team, we had a lot of superstars and a lot of skilled goal scorers. So knowing that we could go into a game scoring 4 or 5 goals really gives a goalie confidence, knowing that even if you do let a weak one in, like there's no worry in the world, like we'll get them back, sort of thing. Um, so having that extra confidence really helps. But also our team was just, we really wanted to win that year. It was unfortunate how things ended up, but we were really pushing it. And Baie-Comeau was kind of a crazy team to play against. Their fans are really rowdy, but they made it a good series, even though the way it ended at 4-0, but they made it a good series playing in their rink.
Well, in the second round, going up against Cape Breton, game 3 went to overtime. Could you explain to me how you calmed your nerves in such a tense situation?
I think just like from experience from being in that league, being in other overtimes, like you just kind of get used to it, I guess, especially knowing the team that we had. I knew everybody was going to do their job, which is the most important thing, right? As long as I keep the puck out of the net, I know our D are going to do what they have to get it out, and we're going to do what we have to do to score, especially with such a skilled team. So kind of having all of that built around and having all those puzzle pieces helps you calm down in those situations.
Because you never want to be on the losing end, especially when you're a goalie giving up that OT lost goal.
Yeah, exactly. If things switch the other way, and we do lose that game, or you do let in that goal, you kind of that's a crappy thing about being a goalie. Like you feel like a lot of things weigh down on you due to that goal, or you start playing mind games with yourself, like, oh, if we won that game, maybe we would have been in a better position, or anything, right? So, but staying calm during those things are the biggest thing, and trying to focus on your team and doing what you can do, right? Like I know I'm not going to be the one to score a goal, so I can only control what I can. So I think once you understand that, and once you learn that, it's a lot easier to stay focused.
Well, there's always empty net opportunities in the OUA, so you got to take a shot at scoring one sometime, right?
Oh, once in a while, if they pull the goalie and they dump the puck in, I mean, you got to go for it. But
yeah, exactly.
Actually, funny because there were two opportunities I had in the queue. That one was actually against Baie-Comeau when I played for Charlottetown in that playoff series. It was game 4. We were up 2-1, I believe, and they pulled their goalie, and they dumped the puck in, went for an ice change, and I stopped it. I looked down at the net. I'm ready to shoot and score it. And then I ended up just giving it to our D-man. Our head coach, Jim Holden at the time, comes up to me after the game. He goes, "Why didn't you take that shot? Like, it was clear." He's like,
"That's hilarious."
He goes, "That was textbook. Like everything was set up perfectly for you." And I was like, honestly, I didn't want to risk them tying it 2-2, even though we probably would have been fine in the series just because we were so dominant against them. But I was like, I don't want to take that risk of it being like a 4-1 series, or them coming back to play at our home barn. But that was one I regret. Definitely, I should have taken that shot. But
continuing on with the playoff talk here, you got a playoff shutout in game 1 of round 3 against Armada. Do you take any comfort in shutting out your former team?
Absolutely. I mean, if you always beat your older teams, it's a great feeling. And it's kind of that like FU attitude, like you to kind of want to prove them wrong of trading you, even though it was nothing to do with me, or like there were just things behind it. But it's always a good feeling to kind of have some revenge, I guess, if you want to say. However, I know that series kind of took a turn because they definitely figured out our system, and they figured out a way to kind of pressure us. And we were a pretty competitive team. But with that being said, we weren't very good at keeping our composure. So we ended up taking a couple penalties that kind of put us down, and it was a tough situation, but it was a good learning experience for sure.
How did you end up playing for Moncton the next year?
So what really happened is it was me and Matt Welsh on the Charlottetown Islanders, and he was kind of drafted there. He was kind of like the face of the franchise, like drafted there at 15, 16, been there. He played out his whole career in Charlottetown. So it was kind of at the end of that season, our head coach kind of talked to us, and he's like, same kind of situation. He's like, you guys are both starting goalies. We would love to have you both, but like that's not fair to your guys' career. However, I guess I always get the short end of the stick. But like he was kind of the face of their franchise, so I was like, I already expected before it was even set in stone. I was already expecting that I was going to be the one getting traded. But when I went to Moncton, I once again like was pretty happy with the situation. I knew Moncton was a good team, and they take really good care of their players. So I was excited to go there, kind of have a fresh start again, finally kind of be there for the full year for the first time in my career, I think, almost being somewhere for a full season, like start to finish. So as funny as that sounds, is a great experience for me to be in Charlottetown and to play with those pro guys, and then try to bring that leadership to Moncton.
You played for 5 QMJHL teams. Was it kind of one of your goals to play for every QMJHL team? It seems like you get traded every season.
Yeah, almost like sometimes, so as I was saying in Moncton, the Christmas deadline was coming up, and I was like, well, boys, if I make it past this one, it'd be the
That's
first one I
hilarious.
ever made by. So, um, yeah, it's at some point you really like you start to not doubt yourself, but you're like, man, why am I keep getting traded? And like I said, like knowing what I know now, or even like looking back at it, or once I've been through a few trades, it wasn't like my first trade in Blainville where I was like shocked and I didn't know how to deal with it. Like, I guess it's as weird as it sounds, I kind of got used to it. I got used to moving around all the time and
Well, I mean,
almost
that
living out of,
happens when you get traded every
oh,
season at the deadline.
all the time, all the time. I'm living out of my suitcase at this point. I'm not even
Yeah,
unpacking.
exactly.
I get traded and I'm like, well, I'm not even going to put my things in the closet. I'm going to be out of here in 3-4 months. But no, it was a good experience, and like kind of knowing how things turned out was good. But yeah, it was definitely some doubtful moments during those times.
How did the experience from the previous playoffs with Charlottetown help you in the run with the Wildcats?
It helped me a lot actually, especially who we played in that first round. We played one of the top teams, and Rimouski, and just kind of having that experience of watching like all the older guys on Charlottetown, how they like dealt with adversity and like how they just kind of battled through playoffs, because it is a different mindset than the regular season, just like it is in any sport. When you get to the playoffs, it's a whole new game, especially in hockey where you have seven game series, right? So um just kind of accepting that if you lose in a playoff game, like it's not over. Like you never know what can happen in playoffs. So kind of having that mentality and kind of knowing that that's the way playoffs usually run, especially in that league. Like it kind of helped me settle into the leadership role in Moncton.
Speaking on that Rimouski opponent that you guys played, that featured Alexis Lafreniere, who had an 80-point season that year. Could you describe how you guys game planned around him? Because obviously, with you being a goalie, he would certainly be a threat on the ice that you would have to pay attention to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, any best player on the ice, you kind of have that number in the back of your head, like, oh, I got to make sure this guy doesn't score. I got to keep him on the outside as a defenseman or anything like that. But our coach pretty much took like one of our toughest guys, who was Dylan Seitz, and was just like, you're glued to this guy. He's on the ice, you're right beside him. Doesn't matter. Like, make him frustrated, make him not touch the puck. Like, so he did a really good job of locking him down throughout the entire series, especially when it went to 7 games. And it kind of showed us that at the end, like that he didn't have as many points as he definitely wanted to, but we did a good job of locking him down.
In your final season in the Q, you played for Acadia, only winning 8 games. But how did the team make sure coming to the rink would be fun? Because continuous losing can get really, can get in your head and make it not fun to come to the rink.
So absolutely, and I think we might even have a record for least amount of wins. I'm not even sure, but that was definitely one of the toughest seasons that I had to battle through, especially coming off of a double hip surgery that I had after my season in Moncton. So that was a huge mental battle for me to kind of accept that I'm not on a winning team, especially they just won the Memorial Cup the year before. So a team does that usually, they trade all their players away and all that and everything. So we were rebuilding as well as I'm trying to recover from that. It was very, very difficult. Coming to the rink isn't as fun, like you mentioned. It's definitely mentally draining, knowing like you're playing some tough teams and your team just isn't at the top of their skill level. So it's definitely tough to kind of show up day in and day out to practice. I'm not sure how we made it fun, but we just kind of battled through it. Honestly, it's just one of those things that happens, and that's the way hockey goes. You got to go through a rebuilding season, and as bad as it is, you don't ever want to be a part of that, because it's always tough, especially as your last year in the league. However, it's always gratifying knowing that you're doing something good for the organization in the long run.
Exactly, and like we could speak to the Montreal Canadiens right now who have 8 wins in their first 36 games or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
coming to the rink can't be fun because you're going up against an opponent and you're just like, man, like is this another loss? Like another
Oh,
loss.
it's crazy.
Winning cures everything, it seems.
Yeah, it's crazy because you, like you're saying it, you show up and you're like, well, are we about to lose? And I feel like at some point you're just expecting to lose, but you're just trying to
Yeah.
make that deficit as small as you can. Instead of losing 8-2, you're gonna try and make it like a
Three
3-1
two,
game or
two two
something.
one.
Yeah, like try to find those positives. But I mean, for me personally, like I, as much as it wasn't fun losing, but I got to get 40, 50 shots a game. So like I was having a lot of fun just playing minutes and like getting a lot of shots and seeing a bunch of different teams and how skilled other players are and just kind of grow the knowledge of the game in that sense. But yeah, just try and finding the positives and all the bad stuff is the biggest thing when you're going through a tough season like that.
After you finished with the Q, you came to the decision to continue your hockey career with Carleton. How did you come to that decision?
So I kind of was able to come out here for a tour of the campus and I mean I loved it. I loved the campus style instead of being spread out through downtown or anything. I always wanted to be on a school that has like its own little facilities and its own campus. Everything's like easily accessible. And then I just loved Ottawa and also just being away from home for so long, even from such a young age. I think I was just used to living away. So it's was kind of a easier decision for me whether to stay home or come here. But I was like, I'm so used to being away, I may as well continue that path.
The difference between U Ottawa and Carleton is that U Ottawa is scattered all downtown, right? So that's the one
Exactly.
advantage that Carleton has is that it's kind of like its own private island if you want to have it like that.
Yeah, and I love that. It makes you feel like you're actually at school, right? It doesn't make it feel like, oh, I'm downtown and I
Like
gotta walk to this
tourism and
class.
stuff
And
like that,
oh
right?
yeah, so it's great. I honestly love the campus feeling. It's one of my favorite things. Like being able to know like when you're on campus, like you're at school, and if you want to go get some food or something, it's always like surrounded by students or anything. It's a very like home. It's a very like homey feeling, even though it's still a university, right?
Yeah, like I remember coming to the University of Ottawa for the first time. I thought I got lost. I had to ask a couple of students like where the hockey rink was because I was like,
Yeah.
man, this campus is not as I guess kind of structurally organized as Carleton is. Because like you mentioned,
Hmm.
once you're on campus, you're on campus. Like everything seems to be scattered over there.
It is. I mean, everything like even classes are just like in random buildings. I'll be driving downtown or even like walking downtown and I'll see like a U Ottawa sign. And I'm like, how's this U Ottawa? Like we're right beside the mall or like
Yeah,
something. You know what I mean?
exactly.
I'm just confused. I'm like, you got to walk to this class and then you're like walk another like couple kilometers or drive a couple kilometers and then it's another U Ottawa building. I'm like, oh my, like you guys are really scattered all over the place. Like, but yeah, just being able to like know you're on campus, especially with us, how like the river kind of divides us along with like that highway, kind of like you were saying,
Yeah.
it's like that island feeling. So you know like where everything is. Like you don't have to search too far to find buildings.
You began your career for the Ravens with a bang in the first season, winning 11 games. How big was that of a confidence boost since the year prior you only won 8 games?
I mean it's huge, and like another big reason why I came here is I saw how strong our team was going to be. So definitely our coaching and our team helped us solidify a great first season for me and like for our team as well. Unfortunately, we kind of got the short end of the stick in playoffs there with a lot of injuries and double and triple overtimes. But yeah, I know my first season here, I was really content with where my game is and like where my play was. And I think going through those tough times in Acadia, having that really brutal, tough season, but getting 40, 50 shots a game really got like my game ready and set up to a T to play at this like higher level in my mind.
You go from best of 7 to best of 3 in the playoffs. How does that change the mentality of how you prepare?
Oh, it's insane the difference that it makes. Knowing that every game is like your elimination game, even regular season, right? And regular season in the Q, you play over 50, 60 games where Here it's only just over like 20.
Yeah.
So every game means so much more, and it really reflects on in our games how you see players play, and like how everything means that much more, and how much grittier like the sport is, just because those points mean that much more. So when it's a 3-game series, you have to win your home games, especially if you have home ice advantage. And like I just mentioned, when we played Concordia, it was unfortunate because our first game we had like 3 or 4 defensemen that got hurt, and then we were also going into double or triple overtime. So like trying to battle those injuries and trying to come out on top is almost impossible. And then going right back to their barn after they won that game is even harder to try and come back and play. So I think that one went to double overtime as well. So it was just a crazy aspect to kind of adjust. However, playing through the season and knowing how much games mean, I think it kind of sets up a good playoff pace.
You didn't play during the 2020 season, which was obviously the COVID shutdown season for everyone. What's your story of when you heard the NBA was shutting down?
So it's actually kind of funny because basketball is one of my favorite sports to watch in general. So I know around that time when everybody was like posting on Instagram and posting on Facebook, like, oh, COVID this, like COVID that, like it's breaking out in like Europe now and all this, like, I know me and my roommates were just like, no, this isn't real kind of thing. Like same, we were like, oh, this is just like fake. Like everyone's just trying to get scared or like scare us. And then as soon as like Rudy Gobert like declared that he had COVID and they shut down the NBA, I was like, in my mind, I was like, oh, this is real. Like this is gonna be
just turned on a dial. All right, this is real.
As soon as like, especially like such a big corporation like that, like like that league, like they bring so much marketing and everything to the table. So when they close down, like, it's a big deal. So when that happened, I was like, oh no, like this is gonna be a lot worse. This is gonna be what everybody's saying it's gonna be, right? Like we're gonna be locked down. Like it's gonna be a bad next year. So, so I guess to answer that, like hearing them close down, kind of like put in perspective, like this isn't just like a joke on the internet or anything. Like this is actually happening. And then I was able to move back home for the remainder of like, I guess, lockdown to try and spend some time with my family and everything, which was good to kind of get back and I guess have the world slow down a little bit. But yeah, it was just a huge eye opener when things started to really take a turn.
So my story about this is, I was coming home from school. My day ended at 3 p.m. and my dad picks me up and we're driving home. We throw on the TV and we see like TSN's breaking the news, with the hockey insiders, Pierre LeBrun, Darren Dreger, James Duthie, all the crew there. And they're like, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen with the NHL season. The referees are being told to go home. It was wild. Like, everything switched so quickly. It was so uncalled for.
Oh, it switched within like that day, I'm pretty sure. Like, and once one thing started closing, they were like, yeah, NBA's closed. Yeah, NHL's closed. Everything just started shutting down. And when that happened, it was like, well, here goes the rest of the world just about to shut down. So
yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how not nobody, but how a lot of people didn't take it seriously. Even like myself,
I didn't take it seriously because it was so far away. That's the reason, right? Like we're not focused on the news in Europe. We're focused on the news that happened in North America, happening in USA. We don't really care what's happening in Europe, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we didn't think it was real.
And especially
it's going to affect them and them only. That's what I thought.
Oh, exactly. And then as soon as it's like those big corporations too, and it's like, like the NHL, like everybody knows the NHL, everybody knows the NBA, like everybody knows the NFL, like even if you don't watch sports, you still know about it. So like when those things start shutting down, you're like, oh, like this is, like I said, like this is becoming legitimate. Like, so I think that's when everybody started getting scared in a sense and starting to be protective. And yeah, but it was just a crazy turnaround how everybody went from this isn't happening to us to, oh, we gotta react now.
Well, let's move away from this COVID talk and talk about this season that has been postponed. Maybe we'll get some rescheduled games. We don't know yet, but This season in 6 games, you have, a 304 goals against average and a 914 save percentage. But how confident were you in your game coming off a full year off ice?
To be honest, it's funny to think about. And me and my goalie coach now, Matt Jenkins, we talked about it. It's so hard to get a perspective, especially my first game I'm going to talk about mostly, but like it's so hard to get a perspective of how you're training and what's like what you're doing right, because there's no games to compare it to, right?
Yeah.
So when you're practicing for a full year, you could feel like you're doing the right things, but you don't really know until you test it in a game.
You can't
So I
simulate what's
remember
happening in practice until you get to a game,
exactly,
right?
and you can play scrimmages and you can play 5-on-5, but it's never the same until it truly like means you're playing for points or you're playing for positions, right? It's
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
very different. So I mean, I remember talking to him. I was like, I don't know how I feel going into this first game or even going into this season. And if you watch some video, like my first game, I was playing so like low in my stance and like so aggressive just because like I was like trying to be as fast as I can and like do all these things that like normally you play calm or like you play more relaxed. But because it was the first game in like a year or a year and a half, I was like, nothing's getting by me. Like you gotta stop it no matter what. Same like that Dominic Hasek reference I was making. Like it's just a battle at that point where
Sorry.
as games went on, like you calm down, right? You're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm doing the right thing. I'm in the right position. Like I can kind of relax now and like really build on my game than just trying to stop everything, if that makes sense.
Well, in that first game of the season, you guys beat Ottawa in overtime on the road. You steal some points
Yeah.
in their own barn, which is huge. Can you speak to how juiced the locker room was post game?
Oh, anytime we play them, it's there's such a big rival. Like I know we say the Colonel By Classic, but like any game we play against them is the same thing. Like you're always gonna get the both teams going head to head. They're both playing their hardest. Like so whichever team comes out on top at the end of those games, like they are pumped up. Like doesn't matter who you are, like doesn't matter what game it is, you beat Ottawa or they beat us, like that team is fired up. So especially not playing for a full year and that being our first game back, everybody was ecstatic. Like it was such a great feeling, especially like we were talking about, like especially being the first game back. It was unbelievable.
Could you get a sense that the team was kind of motivated, given that it was the first game on the schedule and that it was the first game in over a year for most of the guys?
Oh yeah, everybody was dialed in. Everybody was trying to get whatever they could, get as ready as they could for this game because it is such a big, as big as it is playing though that team, it being the first game in a year and a half is just like everybody's play. It's almost like NFL playoffs. Like everybody's like, this is like do or die pretty much, even though it was the first game of the season, which is funny to think about. But
You
this
never
is
want to
like, this
lose
is
a game
gonna,
against your
no.
rivals.
Oh, never, never. So especially it meaning that much, like everybody, and I'm sure their team has been on the same page. Like you are just putting everything you can on the line in those games. So it was a really good experience, and I know like I think a lot of the newer guys, it was tough for them to kind of see that rivalry. But as soon as they like, even in our exhibition games, as soon as they like kind of understood like this is how big it is, it was a great experience.
Well, I know being a new guy, I could absolutely feel it from puck drop. I was
Oh
juiced,
yeah.
I was amped, and I'm a reporter over here trying to be the middle ground. Well,
Yeah, no, even the fans were getting into it. Like it
yeah.
was great. It was great. Like
Could you speak about how I guess like how your game has evolved throughout the season? Because like you mentioned earlier, you didn't seem as confident going into the season, but now that we're 6 games in and you've had some reps under you, could you speak to how confident you are now?
oh, it's a lot different. Not that I wasn't confident before, but it's like that little like not playing in so long. You just have like that little mind in the back of your head. It was like, has everything you've done for this past year actually been working?
Yeah.
So that's just like a little like mind in the back of your head. But now after having those reps and those games underneath me, it's like it brings that confidence as well, right? It's the same thing. Like if you're a new driver and you're driving for the first time, you're gripping the steering wheel, and like the more you drive, like you get relaxed. So I think especially in the goalie position, the more relaxed you are and the more confidence you have, the better you are because you trust yourself, you trust your skills, right? So I think now it's just trying to to keep that up, even though we're not able to play at the moment, is just trying to keep up those that confidence as soon as we're able to get back.
One special thing the university does is these rivalry games with Ottawa that we kind of talked about off camera. Football has their Panda games. Hockey has the Bytown Classic. Basketball even has one. How frustrating is it that you guys almost, basically got robbed of the specialty game against Ottawa?
Yeah, it sucks. It definitely sucks because those games are so much fun to play in, and I was lucky to experience it my first year. Even though I didn't get to play, I got to experience the crowd and like the preparation for that game and how big they are. Even like watching the Panda games, like how juiced both schools get. Like it's incredible to see the support and like the fans that come out. So I feel bad more or less for like the new guys that weren't able to experience that, or not even experience it, but they didn't even get to see it.
Yeah.
They kind of got a glimpse of it at the Panda game this year, but just to being on the ice and having that rivalry game is huge, and it's such a cool feeling. So hopefully either one they reschedule, or hopefully by next year we'll be able to have that game. But they're definitely something special to be a part of, especially we're playing for that banner too. Like you want that in your rink, you want that hung up, so every time the other team comes by, like they get to see it. Yeah, we beat you at this game, like we're taking the W. So
As we're closing off this interview here, do you have any advice for future goalies?
for future goalies, I'd say my biggest thing that helped me grow was control what you can control. I'm such a huge competitor and I always want to win. However, hockey's such a team sport, and as a goalie, like you're not scoring a hat trick to win the game, right? You can make the big saves and do all this, but you got to learn how to control what you can control. And I think as soon as younger goalies learn that, or especially if they're competitive, like it helps them a lot because you have to focus on what the other team's doing, not as much as on what your team's doing. But yeah, like you can't go out there and score goals as much as you want to. Like you have to kind of make sure you play in your crease, know your headspace, and just kind of worry and focus on yourself more or less.
Well, I'd like to thank again Mark Grametbauer for joining me on today's podcast. Thank you again, Mark.
No, thanks for having me.